Well, g'day, it's Brad from the A-League Couch Critics. Finally, after so long, the A-League men's competition resumed on Friday. We had 6 games over the course of the weekend, and by golly, we've been waiting for this to finally come back, and it felt like an early Christmas present for all us Australian fans. I'll be going through the 6 games, kind of give my thoughts on them. Let's get into it. Well, actually, before we get into it, just going to say, obviously, Samuel's not here, but hopefully he'll be back for the next episode. Well, we got underway, as I said, on the Friday night, and it was the defending champions Melbourne City hosting Brisbane Roar. We had just over 7,000 at the game. How great to see fans back at games now as the country is slowly opening up after being under COVID restrictions for so long, at least in Victoria and New South Wales. So I only saw bits and pieces of this game. I wasn't able to sit down and watch, and I haven't really had the time. I don't actually have much time to sit back and watch complete 90-minute games. Boy, don't I miss those uni days when it felt like 13 months of the year I was on holidays. But it was some quick fire goals in the space of 3 minutes that got the job done for Melbourne City. Just before half time, it was Curtis Good and Connor Metcalf getting the 2 goals for the reigning champions. But from all reports in the second half, Brisbane Roar played particularly well. And for me, that's a bit surprising. And I think what shouldn't be surprising, because I don't think I had Brisbane Roar in the top 6. And they're just one of those teams that always finds a way to make it in the final, so should never rule them out. And I guess, I think Melbourne City was quite lucky to get the 3 points in the end. Luke Jovanovic, on his debut for the Roar, was able to pull one back for the visitors, and I think they were quite unlucky not to get a second with a goal being ruled off for offside. It looked like it was pretty tight, but VAR was deciding that it was offside, and so it wasn't to be for the Roar. But I think the Roar can be particularly, obviously they're not pleased that they can get a result, not even a point, but I think they can be pleased that they really stuck it to the defending champions. And I think we're probably going to see a particularly good season from Brisbane Roar, although it is early days, so I shouldn't probably jump the gun. But yeah, so that was Melbourne City 2, Brisbane Roar 1. Now on the sad day, we had 3 games, and it was the first time actually we've ever had 2 games kick off at once. Western Sydney Wanderers hosting Sydney FC in the Sydney Derby, one of the biggest matches in Australian sport. That kicked off at 7:45, and that was on Channel 10. But the other game that kicked off at the same time, that was Western United v Melbourne Victory, and that was Geelong. That kicked off at the same time, and you were able to watch that through Paramount Plus. I guess I'll kind of talk about the Victorian game. Obviously, I only had it on my phone, watching bits and pieces as I was watching the Sydney Derby. In the end, the stressfulness of the Sydney Derby kind of took my eyes away from that completely, and Victory there getting the win away from home 1-0 in Geelong. About almost 7,000 fans there, but from all reports it seemed like it was quite heavily favoured towards the Melbourne Victory supporters. So that was a great way for Tony Popovic to get his reign at the Victory underway. Obviously, Victory had a very disappointing season last year, and so to get a win straight off in round 1, that'll feel pretty good for the Melbourne boys, who have struggled in the past few years. And obviously, the game I was paying a lot of particular attention to was the Sydney Derby. Obviously, it finished in a little draw, as a few people are calling it, the Penguin. If you don't know what that is, I'll throw up the graphic of what the scoreline looks like on Channel 10 when it is a 0-0 draw. For me, I think the Wanderers played quite well. I think we were very strong in defence. I think that's a great joy in light of recent years when we have shipped a lot of goals. To have a really solid defence in the Derby, I think in recent years we can get really dominated by Sydney FC in the Derby. And Sydney FC probably I think they had their fair share of possession, but it never felt like they particularly dominated. We're getting smashed the whole game. I think when I was watching the game, obviously the nerves were overwhelming for me, as it always is in a derby, or really when the Wanderers are playing. But I think I look back at that game and I think, Sydney FC probably had more of the possession, but I don't think I was particularly worried. Well, I mean, if I look back at it, I think our defence handled it quite well. And Rhys Williams, I think, probably the standout player from the opening round. Looked like he was pulling up with cramp with about 15, 20 minutes to go. And if that was the case, he played particularly well. I don't think he looked particularly stressed or worried throughout the game. He took real good care of the Sydney attackers. Lafondra, he probably had better games. So someone else who's had a lot of better games is Ryan Grant. I felt like for someone who's played probably more football than any of the other A-League players, he wasn't at his best as what we've become accustomed with Ryan Grant. But from the Wanderers' perspective, I think I can't be too disappointed with the result. I think neither team probably wanted to lose the opening round, especially as it was a derby and it was the first round. They just don't want to risk too much. You know, they wouldn't want to start the season with a loss. I don't think I can be too disappointed with a draw. I think I am a little bit disappointed at finish 0, particularly the amount of chances both teams had. There could have been a couple to each team, and boy, Jack Rodwell almost had an absolute belter on his debut, having a shot from distance, and it was a pretty good save from Andrew Redmayne. But I guess from a Wanderers perspective, there's a lot to like. From a Sydney FC perspective, I think there's still a lot to like as well. I don't think Bobo was playing for them, and Barbarousis was also out. So with those guys coming back in the team, they'll still be quite a formidable force throughout the rest of the season. And moving on to the late game over in Perth. Massive crowd there, 17,000. Probably haven't seen a crowd like that at a Perth regular season game since the NSL days. And boy, they got to see Daniel Sturridge. Mind you, only came on 5 minutes late, but it was Bruno Fornaroli probably taking the headlines with his fantastic strike. I was lucky enough to be able to watch all of this game. And to be fair, 1-1 draw was actually quite disappointing. And at periods, Adelaide United were dominating. I don't think I rated them too particularly well. I know Samuel has big expectations from Adelaide, but I probably didn't rate them in the preseason that highly. I think it's a bit unfair from me. But they dominated. They were just creating chances out of nowhere, and it was 1-1 at the halftime break, but they could have been up by a couple goals at the halftime break. It was Cassini Yengi opening up the scoreline in the 22nd minute. It was only about 5 minutes before halftime that Bruno scored his fantastic goal. If you haven't seen it, I recommend go checking it out. It was probably the goal of the weekend for me. I don't think no other shot stands out for me. But Sturridge with a brief cameo at the end, and obviously the fans kept chanting for him the whole game to see him. They finally got to see him. Shut up, cat. Now we're moving on to Sunday's fixtures. The F3 derby, Newcastle Jets hosting the Central Coast Mariners up at Newcastle. Just under 7,000 people there for the games. The conditions weren't particularly great, and there was a lot of forecast from rain, and the forecast didn't let down. It was a pretty wet and miserable day up at Newcastle, but there was a lot of joy for the travelling Mariners fans who made the trip up the highway there. And it was Josh Nisbet. I actually went to the FFA Cup game the week before up in Mudgee, and I was surprised how short Josh Nisbet is. I don't think I've ever really noticed how short he is, but he's so short. But anyway, he scored his first ever goal for the Mariners. Fantastic for him. So it was 0-0 at the break. He scored early on in the second half. And then Jacob Farrell, only 7 minutes later, was able to score for the Mariners. Newcastle did pull one back through Valentine Yule. That was with about 12 minutes to go. But it was Mariners getting the result. I'm quite surprised. I thought, especially with the Mariners coach from last season moving on, I really thought they were going to struggle this year. And I thought Newcastle probably would have had a better season than they did last year when they're coming second last. But also, it's only the first week, so I'm not going to get too carried away. But, you know, maybe the Mariners are going to put in another good season as they did last year. So maybe everyone ruled them out too early. But it's only week 1, so I'm not going to get too far ahead of them. But they are top of the ladder. Congrats, Mariners. I think at the start of last season when they were top for the opening 4 or 5 weeks, we kept joking about how they were going to fall down the ladder. It's kind of like an elephant at the top of the tree. You don't know how the hell it got there, but it's going to fall down. But they only dropped down to 3rd, so, maybe they're in for another big season and they're going to surprise a few. I'm not quite sure, but it's early days. And then the final game on the Sunday, a lot's been said online and by the club itself. Macarthur having to move their home fixture from Campbelltown to Newcastle because of the shocking state of the Campbelltown surface. You've seen the photos. If you haven't, one will probably pop up on the screen. Not great condition. I think we found out on Friday night they were moving the game, and then on Saturday Macarthur came out with another press release kind of just giving it to the local council, saying it's the local council's fault. They haven't played a game since probably Macarthur played early in the year, and to have the field in that state, it's not good. Not a good look for the A-League. It's we're entering a new era, and to have something like that in the first week of the season, it's not great at all. And there's even talks about their next game at home, which I think is against the Mariners on the first weekend of December, the field might not be ready for that too. So not good look for Macarthur, but for Wellington, I think they surprised a few, myself, and I think a lot of other people have tipped them to run last. But a very impressive 1-1 draw, I think, against a really good Macarthur team. Wellington played quite well. It was Gary Hooper actually scoring a penalty in the first half. And then in the second half, Macarthur were able to pull one back through Lockie Rose on the hour mark. But there was no other effects to the scoreline. I think it was a lot better than the previous game, the F3W beforehand. So the conditions weren't favourable for a great game of football. But Wellington, I think, will be pretty happy with that draw, especially the, I guess, a lot of, not negative comments, probably a lot of people doubting their credibility this season. Great result I think, for Wellington, and probably a disappointing one for Macarthur, who I thought they would have won that quite comfortably. But yeah, that's our wrap on the that's my wrap on the 6 games. So great to have the A-League back. I guess, what was your highlight from the weekend? Let us know in the comments. What was your standout moment from the opening round of the season? Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment. It really helps us out so much. We've cracked over 400 subscribers too. That's so awesome for the channel, and Samuel and I can't be more thankful for to all our subscribers out there. But anyway, we'll see you in the next video.